When Biggie Smalls was killed in 1997, the riddle to who killed him boggled the mind of every fan, music producer, and lover of Biggie's unique rap style. His mother, Miss Voletta Wallace, for several years now, has tried to bring her son's killer to justice. And although it's taken so long, recent confessions by some of Biggie's associates at the time are finally revealing how Puffy may have been responsible for Biggie's passing. And answers to the questions of why Biggie was clearly afraid of Puffy and how Puffy has managed to evade justice for so long are also surfacing. But who exactly ordered Biggie to be killed? And why was Biggie more afraid of Diddy than he was of Suge Knight or the rest of the West Coast, even though he considered Puff to be his true friend? Buckle in, folks, cause we about to spill some tea. Okay, so if you mention rappers whose style had enough energy to power the whole of New York City, and who will forever be remembered as the real deal, who shaped hip-hop as we know it today, two names will always come to mind. The first is Tupac Shakur, and the second is none other than the notorious B.I.G. And no one can deny that Big was the biggest and the baddest in the rap game. The music he produced during the short span of his career turned the owner of his formal record label, Puffy, into a billionaire, and continues to rake in a lot of money today. But Biggie's murder is still yet to be solved, even though it's been over 25 years. But it looks like with recent evidence that is coming to light, we may finally know who was really responsible. So just 6 months after Tupac was shot and killed in a drive-by, Biggie Smalls was shot at a stoplight in LA, also in a drive-by. Biggie and the rest of the Bad Boy Records crew were leaving the Soul Train Music Awards after party when he got shot in his arm, his back, his thigh, and his hip. He didn't die immediately, but 3 of the 4 shots fired at him were fatal, and he passed away on the way to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, putting an end to his career. As you all know, Diddy is one of the richest men in hip-hop. As of 2022, he overtook Kanye West and went on to clinch the number 2 spot of richest men with his net worth being over $1 billion. But he wasn't always the A-list artist he is today. In fact, he started out as an intern at Uptown Records, and according to him, he didn't know how to play any musical instruments, but he single-handedly sold over 2 million records for Uptown, and his brilliance led him to have a power tussle with his then boss and owner of Uptown, Andre Harrell, which led to Andre firing him. Diddy later said that his dismissal from Uptown set him up to become who he is today. In his own words, he said, "Getting fired was one of the best things that could have happened to me." Even Andre said that he fired Puff only to make him rich. But how did Puffy, whose rap skills didn't and still don't rival most of his contemporaries at the time, become one of the richest men in music? And his music label, Bad Boy Records, become such a top-level record label that youngsters like Young Miami wouldn't mind being publicly humiliated and shamed just to be part of it. Well, that's where the wild accusations started coming. And the first one was made by Miss Wallace, who said she found out after her son died that Puffy was all about the money, and Biggie made a big mistake to have ever trusted him.
You know, some of some of his associates, I still want to strangle them.
And I think that Miss Wallace feels this way about Diddy because Bad Boy Records was literally built on the back of Biggie's achievements as a musician. So as Puff left Uptown Records and started his own record label, he took along with him Biggie Smalls. Even though Big was originally signed to Uptown, he also signed Faith Evans, Total, Mace, Lil' Kim, Mario Winans, 112, and others. But of all the names he had in his record label at the time, the strongest voice and talent was Biggie, which was probably why he orchestrated the beef between Biggie and Tupac. So Tupac and Biggie weren't always enemies, and some fans even believe that their beef was mostly lyrical and not exactly one that would result in a dangerous scene. This was even despite the fact that Tupac suspected Biggie and the rest of the Bad Boys crew of being responsible for him getting hit and robbed at Quad Studios. But when Diddy was presented with the opportunity to squash the beef between Biggie and Pac, he refused to send any representatives or take any part in the resolution, according to his former bodyguard, Gene Deal.
So when they had that meeting, they called Puff for a representative. Like, yo, you want somebody to represent you? Because we're going to try to squash this shit and get this shit, just about making money or whatever like that. And Puff wouldn't give nobody the okay. He wouldn't give Zip the okay, Chaz or nobody the okay to represent him in one of those meetings. He didn't want to have nothing to do with it.
And this is just very suspicious because looking at it from the outside, he had nothing to lose and everything to gain if he ended the beef between these two artists. But he chose to sit that one out, and I think that the reason was because he knew that the beef would sell records. And reports of an amicable resolution might have resulted in the buzz fizzling out around Biggie at the time, which meant Bad Boys won't make as much money. Gene even said at the height of all this messiness, Puff confided in him that what mattered was his business and the record label, not Tupac and not even Biggie. He was just all about the money.
I'm about making money, but something gotta change. I don't give a fuck if Pac gotta die, Big gotta die, or Suge Knight go to jail.
And this is very shocking because at the time, Biggie considered Puff to be one of his tightest friends who could do anything for him. Even after his death, Miss Wallace never felt comfortable with how much Big trusted Puff, and yet Puff was comfortable throwing him under the bus for some money. She even called their relationship an illusion in her book titled Biggie. In her words, when talking about Puffy and Biggie's relationship, she said, "To this day, Christopher is one of the most loyal human beings I have ever known, and it was a sentiment he expected in others, but he learned the hard way that this was not always the case. The truth is, Christopher accepted the illusion of a friend and mentor for about $25,000. That's the amount Puffy lured my son with." She later went on to say, "I told Christopher that he needed to become more knowledgeable about the business side of his career, but Christopher, with his extremely loyal self, couldn't take me talking about Sean even when I had my son's best interest at heart." She later wrote in her book that Faith was the only one she felt she could trust. She said, "Then I thought of Faith. I knew she and Christopher were no longer together, but she was the one person who came to mind whom I felt I could trust. She was the person I had grown to trust." And when the time came to shoot Biggie's documentary, she once again curved Diddy and enlisted the help of Jay-Z to bring it to life. She said, "So usually I just say, get Jay for me. This is what they want to do." And he was always there. So she considered Jay-Z to be a genuine friend of Biggie, but not Diddy. And what can I say, but that of a mother's sixth sense is always 100. Moreover, Gene also said at the time of Biggie's demise, he was on his way out of Bad Boys, and my guess is that he finally wanted to learn the business side of his career, as his mom advised him to, but was met with his death instead. And on the occasion of his death, since he was still signed to Bad Boys, all of his unreleased work became the property of Bad Boys to do as Diddy pleased, and best believe that those songs made Diddy some hard cash.
Puffy has been making money off of Biggie's name for longer than Biggie was alive.
And reports have it that Diddy was the one who insisted that Biggie went to the Soul Train Awards after party at the Peterson Museum, even though they were receiving a lot of threats and it was obvious that Biggie wasn't safe. He also refused to ride with Biggie in the same vehicle, as if he knew something was about to go down. But Miss Wallace and Gene weren't the only ones who considered Diddy to be shady. Jaguar Wright also made some pretty damning allegations against Diddy. She said in a recent interview that since Diddy was the only popular ex-member of Uptown Records to have survived, he must either be very lucky or the one responsible for all the deaths and misfortune, including the mysterious death of Kim Porter, Andre's personal secretary and his own baby mama.
Town Records started with 5 people. Andre Harrell, I'll Be Sure, Heavy D, and Puffy. And Kim was the longest working employee because she was there from the very beginning. She was Andre's personal assistant. Kim is dead. Heavy D is dead. Andre Harrell is dead. The only 2 left are Puffy and Al almost died. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Heavy D was found dead, face down in the heart attack. Andre Harrell, heart attack. Kim died from pneumonia, but there's the first coroner's report that said that she died. It was ruled a homicide, and they found toxins in her body to prove that she had been poisoned. You know, they have poisons that create heart attack and pneumonia-like symptoms. And then right after that, Al had a meeting, and I was going to meet up with him because we were in Vegas, and then the next thing you know, You want to know what they all had in common, though? The survivors and the late of Uptown Records, they were all writing tell-all books. Andre was writing a book right before he died. Heavy D was working on a book before he died. Kim Porter was working on a book before she died. And Al B. Sure was working on the documentary of his life. And then he goes into a coma.
As for Diddy, he has tried really hard to distance himself from the claims and said all talks about him manipulating and exploiting Biggie are just rumors to tarnish his name and legacy.
The first of all is there has been negative propaganda put out about me that's not true and has really tried to stain my legacy.
Anyway, fans are now weighing in on why Biggie was afraid of Diddy, and they have a lot to say. One fan of Biggie said, "I feel he kept beef going with Big and Pac so long as it kept money in his pocket, and it cost both of them their lives. It's messed up that Biggie trusted this man with his career and his life. Puffy is dirty and low down for keeping that man publishing. Puffy is mad suspect to me. One day he will have to stand before God and face judgment, shaking my head." While this other user said, "Diddy, you did it. You can't keep running from this forever, 100. But let me know what y'all think. Do you think Diddy was responsible for Biggie's death? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see y'all in my next video.